Robert Young from Force Performance. And I'm also Robert Young from Xona Rotor Turbocharger. Just a little company background there. You know, Force Performance started a long time ago. A friend of mine named Jeff had the first iteration of Force Performance from about 96 till 95 to 90, maybe 7 or so. He passed away, and then I reformed the company in '99. So this is our 20th year anniversary for building DSM turbochargers. I couldn't tell you how many of these things I came to, but it's been a lot of them. You know, I always love coming and seeing all of our old friends up here. But Xona Rotor is about a 4-year-old company, though, and it was formed because we recognized that a lot of the things that I wanted in a turbo, and my friend Greg over at TileSport wanted in a turbo, were not things that were available in turbos. We started to make some of the parts that we wanted and integrate them into existing turbochargers. And then we ran into all the limitations of that, because if you're going to modify someone else's turbo, like a Borg-Warner turbo or a Garrett turbo, you have to be able to get enough of them. And that's not always easy to do when you're ordering from a larger company like that. So that really just led to us making everything, so that when we were out of something, it was our fault and we didn't have anybody else to blame for it. And it's worked out pretty well so far. The Xona Rotor turbochargers have a feature set that you don't see really in any other turbochargers. It's designed as a motorsport style turbocharger that could be run steady state for as many hours as your engine can go. A lot of people ask me, well, do I have to connect the water jacket and stuff? Well, you don't have to. I mean, if you're a drag racer and you're going to buy a new turbo every couple of years anyway, that's fine, you know. But if you're a road racer and you want your turbo to last a couple of years, then yes, you should have the water jackets on there, you know. You don't see the cars on, you don't see the Salines in the Saline Cup races, you know, doing 3-hour races without water cooling on the bearing housings in their turbochargers. And by the way, the Saline Cup cars are equipped with Xona Rotor turbochargers and tile wastegates. So our approach to it was more along the lines of, you know, we really like to have something that is a lot harder to break, you know, and a lot of criticisms about, you know, hey, things leak. So, you know, one of the big features we wanted to integrate was dual piston rings on both sides of the turbocharger, so that, you know, even if you were able to over temp the outboard turbine side piston ring, there was another piston ring 2 millimeters inside the turbo from that one that would likely have lived a cooler life and probably wouldn't over temp and lose its springiness and would still retain a seal in the bore. So you got kind of some run flat capability with the turbocharger, so to speak, or a graceful failure mode, in that it will fail slowly over time. You know, it starts to have a problem, but it's not just, wow, I'm a fiery ball of, you know, hot mess and you're done for the day. This turbos give you plenty of opportunity to realize that, you know, some damage has occurred, you know, before you have a big problem. I really like twin piston ring setups on them. You see it also being integrated into some other turbochargers. I think the EFRs have some. We were the first one to do it in performance turbochargers. Yeah. EFR brought it out right after, right about the same time actually that we did, right in there. But you see like old KKK turbos off the 9. Borg-Warner bought them, and they don't use that name anymore, but it's like Kolben, Kelben, and Koch or something like that. It's a German turbo company. They didn't market under that name in America. but there were precedents for twin piston rings, but you just didn't see them in a T3, T4 hybrid. You didn't see it in a Turbonetics T66. You didn't see it in a Mitsubishi 20G. You didn't see it in a GT30, you didn't see it in a 35R, you didn't see it in a GT42, you didn't see any of those turbochargers. And those Garrett turbochargers were what we were pretty much using as the basis for building our Xona, not our Xona Rotor turbos, but my Force Performance turbochargers for maybe like a 5-year period, probably starting in about 2006-ish or so. They were really popular, and that was really the precursor. That was where a lot of the research and development, that a lot of the things we learned during that period is what rolled over into Xona Rotor, and our compressor wheels got better, and our turbine wheels have really gotten a lot better, and that's probably one of the big things I like to talk about here today. You know, I mean, everybody's seen the billet bearing housings, everybody's seen, you know, the jewelry aspect of the turbocharger, out what a nice turbo it is, and visually, but what you can't see is just what the performance differences really are. Recently had a chance to run one of those Xona Rotor 9569S's against a GT3584 RS and a Precision PT 6870, and we won that one by meaningful amounts. And it was a test performed by a kit builder that had been using some of these other turbochargers that I was trying to explain. Try my stuff, I think you're gonna like what you see. And they were like, well, whatever, yeah, send me one, I'll try it. And then of course, tried it, liked it, and now it's getting integrated into their turbo kits. So there's a big advantage from the new UHF turbine wheel aero. If you haven't seen him, does anybody not know what I'm talking about when I say the UHF turbine wheel aero, the S versions of the cartridges? Okay. If you come by the booth, I'll show you one. I didn't have a loose one to bring over here. But who remembers when we used to clip turbine wheels to try to increase the turbine flow? Okay? I mean, there's actually a thing called a Busher Racing clip in our notebook over at the shop. You take the turbine wheel and, it's shaped like that. Okay? On the top edge, you grind it down at an angle like this to get some of the blade out of the way so that the air can get out of the turbine wheel easier. And generally speaking, that will change the efficiency of the turbine wheel. It'll reduce the efficiency a little bit, but it'll bring the mass flow rate up. And so what most people saw there is they were happy to trade a little bit of efficiency for a significant increase in mass flow rate. What the UHF turbocharger is doing, though, is we kind of recognized what was going on with the clip. Everybody has, right? And we're like, well, what can we do to innovate on the turbine side? We introduced billet compressor wheels in the mid-2000s with the reverse rotation Evo project we were building. That rolled over into Garrett turbochargers. We introduced everybody to billet compressor wheels. We did a lot of good for the industry on compressor sections. Let's focus on turbine sections. So we started working on that problem several years ago, and the UHF turbine wheel aero is the fruit of that project. And what the UHF turbine wheel does is it significantly reduces the inertia of a shaft. So if you've got a turbine wheel head, like in a 69 or 68 millimeter size in that range, that's a full style, normal, typical style turbine wheel, and you compare it to a UHF style, the inertia is just about 40% less for the UHF versus the standard style turbine wheel. And you might think, well, wow, how do you do that? Just, take blades out, right? But if you take blades out, then you can't put power on the shaft because the blade is like the sail on a sailboat. And if you think, well, the sail's getting in the way of this breeze, I better take the sail down. Well, the boat's going to slow down, right? So how do you do that? How do you reduce the restriction for the wind that's blowing by, but still capture a lot of power? And it's a complicated question, but we solved it with the Xona Rotor UHF turbine aero. And what that is it's a 10-blade turbine wheel that has 5 full blades and 5 half blades. So how many of you have seen compressor wheels that look like that, right? Typically before Garrett released GTX, every compressor wheel you looked at, just about, except for a 14B, had half high and half low blades on them. That's called a splitter design. That would be in a category of splitter compressor wheels. The other ones would be called full blade wheels. So what we really did was came up with a way of implementing a splitter design, adopting a splitter idea from compressor into a turbine. Now, when you look at what having a splitter versus a full blade does in a compressor section, the trend that happens when you go from full blade to splitter is that mass flow increases because you have less blade blockage, and the operation map widens. So you've got a wider map. The full blade maps tend to be narrow, and you have to travel up them. Wide maps are better if you need to go up to a boost and then run over to the choke flow. So what we did was basically take that characteristic of compressors and cause it to exist in turbine wheels. And I'm going to have to watch the video of that NSX because I've been wanting to see that car go. So
10-4. I don't know.
I'm not sure what's in it.
What is it?
Yeah.
They were scooping out the ice box this morning when I walked by, so it's Interesting.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to go check out that Acura. The guy came and talked to me yesterday, but I can't remember exactly what he said. So what we did with the UHF is it looks like a compressor wheel. It's a 10-blade wheel, and it's got 5 full blades and 10 half blades. So when the air spins in a circle in the volute, it does that for a little while, and eventually, depending on the AR determines what angle that air is forced into the blade. Eventually, that air that's spinning around has to go into the wheel. And as it does, it pushes each one of those inducer tips of the turbine blades. So that's like the initial paddle wheel part of putting torque on the shaft. That has a lot to do with shaft acceleration too. That's the part of the shaft, the blade that accelerates the shaft. So all of those blades are present. You got 10 of those blades. But as the air goes through the turbine contour and is forced into the exducer area of the turbine wheel, now the area is kind of reducing. And this is where you would have the choke flow section in a turbine normally. That's where the flow would become restricted because there's only so much space between each blade and there's only so much area in that circle. So by having half of the blades only extend halfway axially towards the exducer tip, you take all that blockage out of the exducer area of the turbine wheel. So a turbine that's a like 64 millimeter discharge has a flow rate that's way more similar to something that would be like 4 more millimeters larger. But it has the inertia that's even less than a normal 64 millimeter turbine wheel. So you have a wheel that's this size and it's got this flow rate over here that's higher and it's got this inertia over here that's lower. So it's cake that you can eat, that old saying, you want everything. You can't have everything. Pick what you want and accept it and be happy. But with this turbine wheel, you can have 2 things to be happy about. You don't have to pick, do I just want max choke flow rate or do I just need shaft acceleration? Okay. So in things where you're gonna do like max effort, where autocrossing is very important, but also you wanna have a good drag strip performance, you want a nice round package, street cars, this is perfect for that because you get both aspects of that. There's some examples of that over in my booth, and I'd be happy to, show you those and you can see what it's talking about. There's also some cars here running them today. You got Adriana Noonan in her red 1G automatic with a black hood, and she has a 78 pound a minute. That's a 62 millimeter inducer version of this with a 69S turbine wheel. So it's very imbalanced as far as like, wow, it's kind of got a small compressor for how big the turbine is. But since the turbine's UHF design, it spools up fast enough for her to get it up on converter, get launch. If you see her come launch, she's not Ari Allening, okay? Right. She's just getting right up in there and doing it, So she get up on the converter really quick. She's got an 82 AR turbine housing with a 69S turbine wheel, and she's just making 1-to-1 pressure ratio at the top of the track. 1.1 to 1, 1.2 to 1. It kind of depends on the air conditions and how much boost she's got it set to. So that's really an improvement over the kind of turbo performance we've been able to have before. To get something that will spool up on one of these converters without nitrous, and then also be able to maintain a really preferable EMAP ratio all the way down the track. That's something that you kind of had, like I said, you had to pick one or the other, kind of, or you had to pick the big one and use nitrous to do the spool part. She ran some 880s, 840, 880, right in there.
From a 62 millimeter.
62 millimeter turbo.
And so, this is nothing new. Other manufacturers have tried to accomplish the same thing. And you got like Borg Warner with the EFR. They're using the Thai Gamma stuff.
Yeah, and then you got Mitsubishi's done that. In the decade prior, Mitsubishi's done that. You always had the Tommy Mackinnon edition with the titanium aluminide turbine heads in them.
But the problem with that is the material selection.
Correct.
It's very lightweight. You get the inertia benefit, you get everything else, but you get no durability. It's like might as well be made out of glass if something.
Well, the trouble with that is like, how many of you have ever burned up a spark plug electrode? Okay. Yeah, right? Yeah. Well, when you melt that spark plug electrode off, it's got to go where? It's got to go out the exhaust valve, and then what's next in line? is turbine wheel. So if you have a turbine wheel head material that is porcelain, essentially it's an intermetallic ceramic is what the classification of that material is. So you hear the word ceramic in there, so what does that tell you? There's no ductility to this material. So even a spark plug electrode goes through there and poof, a turbine head will just break like a coffee mug you drop on a concrete floor. So that is an inherent weakness to titanium aluminide, but it is one of the ways that people have tried to resolve this problem in the past. But you have to take that hit on the ductility and the durability of it.
So I got a question for you guys out there. How much information are you guys getting data-wise about your turbo so that you can work with the manufacturer to get a better turbo, a better combination? Do you guys have are you guys recording exhaust back pressures? Are you guys turbo shaft speeds? Nothing. Okay. How much does that help you when you have that info?
Well, I'll put it this way. If somebody calls me and says, I have this car and I have this turbocharger and I'm observing this and I don't think it's quite right and I'd like a little bit more top end, I'd like a little bit more response, I need another turbo, what should I have? If I knew something about what the EMAP was, if I knew something about what the shaft speed was, if I knew something about how much mass flow rate they were really using, in cases where I do know the answer to those things, you get a turbocharger, you put it on your car, you call me the next weekend and you're ecstatic because your goals got satisfied, okay? When you don't know the answer to any of those questions, you get my best guess, okay? You get 20 years of empirical observations about how things work, but I may not realize that you have a boost leak and that was, I may not realize that your blow-off valve wasn't quite staying shut, the way you thought it was, and I might think, oh well, he's probably out of turbo. Let's go up one size. I could send you another one that's up one size, but if that slight little leak thing is still happening, then nothing's going to happen. You're going to go, wow, I wasted my money on this. So yeah, but if you have the information though, you get way better turbocharger selection, and I really recommend. Data logging some stuff, and now everybody's not going to put a shaft speed on there because,
how do you get that? How would I get that to you?
So there's different ones are made and you take it to a machine shop and they can, some compressor housings actually have a boss in there that you can put the sensor, but a lot of them you have to actually machine and you're putting a sensor in there and it's recording a digital pulse there that you're knowing the RPM of the shaft speed. So then you data log that with the rest of your data, so you know when I'm at 30 pounds of boost and I'm making 600 horsepower mass flow, I've got 160,000 shaft speed. And from that, you kind of...
Yeah, and if you tell me my mass flow meter was at 60 pounds a minute, my shaft speed was 111,000 RPM, and my EMAP was 33 PSI, and my boost pressure was, 28 PSI, well now I know exactly what to do for you. Okay, I know exactly where you're at. It's a 3D map and you just told me how far to go this direction, how far to go that direction, and how far to go this direction. And I build the turbo that's right here for you the next time.
So I can actually screw in a little sensor in the turbine housing.
Yeah, I drill a hole, it's like a little M7, M7 threads. Yeah, and it's like a little Hall effect sensor that just watches the blades go by.
Yeah,
it counts them.
I've not heard of that one yet. That was new for me.
Yeah.
I thought I was up on this stuff.
And then he keeps talking about EMAP, the exhaust manifold air pressure, and comparing that ratio of what you're getting in your exhaust manifold before your turbine, what you're getting in your intake manifold. Ideally, you want that to never, to be at most a 1-to-1 ratio, and especially if you're in a
for
class,
drag car.
Yeah,
for drag car for sure.
And especially if you're in a class that's compressor limited, like okay, you can't go bigger than 62. If you could get it at that ratio, you're going to be making more power than some guy who has a 2-to-1 ratio where his back pressure is twice as high.
Good point.
As his boost pressure.
Good point. Exactly. Class racing turbos, like a 62 millimeter class racing turbocharger, you would use an unusually large turbine wheel for that, because the only way that you're going to...
You're working around a limitation they give you.
Yeah, it's like restrictor plate racing.
Right, exactly.
Right? So you have to, if you've only got a 62 millimeter inducer, you have a certain amount of safe RPM that you can run that turbocharger at before it's going to explode. So you want to run it right there. So what are other things you can do to make the whole system work better with I'm running that limited size turbocharger at its max redline? Well, the main thing you can do to make the system work better is make sure that the EMAP's as low as possible. Go right to that top speed operating point, go right to that 2,200 feet per second tip speed point, and then start messing with your turbine housing selection and turbine blade selection to give you what you need to get on your converter, to stage, to launch, to come out of that corner that you need to come out of, whatever it might be. Then you pick your drive section to deal with those car needs, you know. Restrictor class, I mean not restrictor class, but turbo size limit classes is where you see these turbos exploding. Have you guys seen turbos like breaking? There's a lot of videos of them breaking. And turbo class racing has become more popular. We're in 62 millimeter class or 68 millimeter class or something like that. And you know, the tendency there, especially if you don't have a shaft speed indicator, is that you just see how far you can get it to go. You kind of blindly are doing it too. You know, I mean, you wouldn't disconnect the tack from your dashboard, right, and try to make a pass. You wouldn't turn the shift light off and put duct tape over the tack and go make your best pass. You know, you want some indication of the engine, right? You don't want to just trust when does it nose over. You know, you might be thinking it's not. I'm going to hang on a little bit further. So you hurt things cumulatively over time, especially with shaft speed. I had an example of a shaft speed problem that I put up on Instagram the other day, where a compressor wheel had split into two pieces. Okay, and not because the Cookie Monster broke it in half. Okay, but because when you spin something that's in a circle fast enough, there is always an RPM at which you are going to overcome the ability of the different pieces of the molecule of the material to hang on to each other, and it's just going to go bing. Okay, this is why we have scatter shields on crankshafts. I mean, on flywheels. You know, this is why you don't run a cast iron flywheel. You know, you got to run a nice steel flywheel or aluminum flywheel, something that has some ductility that can have a little yield to it. Compressors are no different, and if you don't know how fast the compressor's going, then you don't know when it's about to explode. So this compressor wheel has a TDO 5H size turbocharger. It had a 6.5 millimeter bore when it was made. When it broke apart, it had already stretched to 10 millimeter bore. So before it broke into two pieces, it had stretched 4 millimeter. Okay, so these things deform and stretch, and then they ultimately fail. And if you don't have any indication of how fast the turbo's spinning, you really do run the risk of breaking a turbocharger. And it's a danger that I'm concerned about, honestly. And I'd really like to develop some products to address this, because have you seen some of the cars where the exhaust pipes are at? You know, and have you seen where the people stand?
Yeah.
Okay, so some people are looking at a turbine cannon.
Yeah.
You know, when everybody's seen a potato cannon, you wouldn't look at a loaded potato cannon. You wouldn't look at a loaded deer rifle, but you're going to look at a loaded turbine cannon. Yeah. I've seen some ceilings like that. Yeah. Blew it right through the roof, didn't it? Yeah, and this is a lot of people like to bag on one particular brand, the turbocharger, about this, but I don't know what turbo it was. So some people like to say, this is a problem for these people, but let me tell you, man, it's a problem for every turbocharger that you're going to just see how fast you can make it spin, because the answer is always going to be it's going to spin faster and faster until it explodes. So. I really would like to see some sort of positive industry, like preemptive strike on this. If we could self-regulate on this a little bit somehow, instead of having somebody try to do it for us. Lawyers are not fun. So I'd really like to see people. I like the cross bolt idea. Okay, I didn't used to like the cross bolt idea. Okay, but now I like the cross bolt idea. But I think it needs some evolution, and I'd like to see some products get developed that are turbine arresting products, to be honest with you. So if anybody's ever ends up watching this video someday and they go, wow, that seems like a good idea, but yeah, he's gonna do it. I don't wanna steal his idea. Steal my idea. Make this product. Come up with some ideas and make a product that helps with this problem, because people are not going to put scatter shields on their transmissions unless you tell them they have to. People are not going to put diapers under their cars unless you tell them they have to. People are not going to wear a 5-point harness unless you tell them they have to. Okay, just none of that. You're killing my fun. You're stealing my joy. Don't make me do these things. But some of these things are important. So I know I went on a big old tangent there about safety, but you don't want to see people get hurt. So yes, sir.
I got 2 questions. Are you gonna put this on like your website? This text over?
Yeah, we'll probably will. Yeah, and I'll probably even edit it in some pictures of the things I've been talking about during it, so
And
make it make more sense.
We did also the one at the PRI show.
Yes, you have created a very good video that talks a lot about the aspects of the UHF turbine wheel. Yeah,
Where's that
yeah.
at?
It's
on
on the
YouTube,
It's on the D-Sport YouTube page,
YouTube, yeah.
and I think we also have shared it on the Xona Rotor YouTube page too. So if you search up D-Sport Xona Rotor PRI, you'll see it right away.
And then apples to apples comparison, you had the Porsche guys.
Yes,
Yes. Basically, they took the same turbo. The only difference was changing from
just the turbine wheel.
Turbine wheel to the was it UHF?
UHF, yeah. So we went from a 64 millimeter turbine wheel to a 64 millimeter UHF style turbine wheel with all the features that I was talking about earlier. I'd have to pull the data up to be really accurate, so I'm going to be a little bit vague right here. But ultimately, we ran 100 kPa less EMAP to hit the same power level. Okay. And during that same test, the shaft speed was lower, the EMAP was 100 kPa lower, 14, 15 pounds lower, and we used 70 horsepower less fuel.
And was that VBI?
That was at Dallas Performance.
Dallas Performance,
Yeah. Wayne Potts was doing the EC work for us on that. That was operating that at 1,100 horsepower, which is not really exactly maxed out, but it's pretty close. But we really wanted to see what the difference in what does it mean on the car, because we could see the car was going a lot faster. You would take it to the half-mile events and the Texas Invitational and stuff like that, and we had a lot more mile an hour. I mean, many. I don't. Do you remember what the difference was on that? We were talking about we made like 6. We ended up making like 6 more mile an hour ultimately.
So you got more power, you got better response, and you got lower exhaust back pressure.
Also, that lower exhaust back pressure, and you think, well, I'm not drag racing back pressure, Robert. So what difference does that make? It made the same power, made the same peak power. But the big difference when you looked at the curve was one came and did it, and then kind of does this, and the other one just floats it all the way out, because you don't have this cumulative EMAP just going, I'm a little bit more, I'm a little bit higher, now my EMAP's a little bit higher, and the whole way through the power band, I'm not let your exhaust gas out of your cylinder anymore. I don't let your exhaust gas out. And that's what happens with the standard turbine wheels compared to the UHF. UHF just does not end up being a restriction, even when you put it on like normal matches of sizes, like say my 9569S, which is real similar to like a PT 6870, which is a real popular turbo for people to use. Head-to-head testing, we beat that turbo. Okay, but you can, even when you're putting a heavier load on the larger turbine wheels, since they have all the inducer tips present, you still have all the torque, you still drive it really easy. One of the biggest problems I've observed with UHF, if you want to call it a problem, is that people that are using a closed loop boost control system and saying, I'm going to target this, I'm going to target this, I'm going to target this gear I want this much, this gear I want this much, this gear I want this much, and they've had a lot of calibrating with their feedback boost control, with their proportionals and the derivative, the PID controllers for closed loop. If you change to this turbo, the inertia is so much less on this turbine wheel that the same settings you were using on your heavier turbine wheel end up making it hunt like this. So you end up having to go back in and redo all your PID settings for your closed loop. But if you're just doing duty cycle boost control, this is not an issue at all. But in some cars that spend a lot of time dealing with, and I would never do this, honestly, I would never really spend, why would you want to pay somebody like Shane Tacklenberg for 10 hours of setting up my PID boost control? I mean, it's something that's so silly, but it makes sense though. You want to do it because that's how Mercedes is done, and that's how Ferrari's done. But they built every one of those Mercedes the same exact way. They built every one of those Ferraris exactly the same way. So once they figured all that out and got it working really good, they patted themselves on the back and sold a nice car. This is not what everybody here is doing though. Every one of you is doing something different. So PID boost control and spending a lot of time working on that is sometimes a waste of time. I mean, I ruined a transmission with a twin disc tilt and clutch in there by sitting there idling, changing settings, and trying to do boost control again. Okay, because you idle those things, and they're so light, and it just eats up the shifter hubs and I don't know, I'm not a transmission guy, but they stop shifting after a while, and it happens really quickly if you have a light clutch and you just sit there idling a lot. And I killed clutches just trying to dork around with getting PID closed loop boost control before. So I'm not a big fan of it, but if you use it, your setting's going to be dramatically different with such a lower turn wheel. I imagine you'd have the same problem if you went, if you went from an Inconel turn wheel to a titanium illuminated turn wheel, probably be a similar situation. So it's not a problem that nobody's ever seen before, and it's not really a big problem if you have control over your boost. So,
can I ask you guys a question? Has anybody here ever had the same turbocharger and just changed the turbine housing, tried a different turbine housing on it? Nobody's ever had that experience?
Yeah.
One run AR and go, I want to see what happens if I put a bigger AR on it.
I had somebody change it out for me, but, and it was okay, but then, it's like, oh, sure, I can get that for you, and it never turns out well for me. That didn't turn out great.
Which direction were you going? Were you going from a bigger housing to a smaller, or from a smaller to a bigger?
He went from I had a 16G, and he put a different wheel on it for the 20G, and changed it over, and just went to the larger side, like so it was like a hybrid.
So you made more than one change, not just the turbine housing?
No, okay, no, sorry, not just the housing, the wheel too. So yes,
okay.
I didn't change. Okay, I didn't change just the housing. No.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Well, changing the turbine housing alone has basically it's a way to kind of shift everything. Normally if you just change the air of your turbine housing, you're going from something. If you go from a smaller one to a larger one, you're going to trade off response. You're going to lose a little response, but you're going to gain usually some power and stuff because you're reducing the back pressure.
Okay.
So that was just curious if anybody had done it because we were talking about how that turbine wheel does it, and I had done it before by doing that type of change, and you'll see that same thing happen to the power curve. If you have a power curve that after you hit peak, it's just really nosediving. A lot of times that's because your exhaust back pressure is just going through the roof.
If you had a data set to look at, that's what you'd be seeing. You'd be seeing that there was a lot of EMAP.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those dyno results are on the form they're going to take over.
Oh, they are?
6382 and a 101 on
I think we did that. Yeah, we sure did that. Yeah. It's really neat because it goes like this, and then it shifts over a little bit later spool and has more power, and then it shifts over a little bit more and has even more power. So it's a really big, yeah. So it just depends on where do you want your power at. You got the same, like with any given turbo, like say, like the 3586 that we probably did that turbo on. So that's like that was about 75 pounds a minute at that time. You got the same airflow, okay? But if you're looking at how much horsepower did I make at $8,000, the three different turbine housings had drastically different horsepowers at 8,000 RPM. Yeah, even though you had the same airflow available. And that's because the EMAP's just getting in the way. You're going to run 30 pounds of boost, but if the EMAP was high, there's still exhaust left in the cylinder. So when you got 30 pounds of boost trying to fill into the cylinder with some more air, well, it's already partially full of exhaust gas that wasn't able to leave because it didn't have, it was too much restriction in the exhaust. So it's clear as day when if you were to do the test yourself, run from it, or like if you're a DSM guy, so going from a stock 6 centimeter housing to a 7 centimeter housing on off a 16G, and then to like an FP8 centimeter, or now I've made a 10 centimeter one. You're just going to see the same trend. Of I want more. It's like, what kind of converter do you want in your car? If you have an automatic transmission, do you want a loose converter? You want a 4,000 stall converter? You want a 2,200 stall converter? It's kind of an analogy to use, or how tall is your tire? That sort of thing. What rear axle ratio you would have? That you gotta look at the turbine part of the turbo like that's your drive section. And sometimes I even, instead of saying EMAP, I'll just say drive pressure. What was your drive pressure? Because that's the part that's putting all the power on the shaft. So that's critical because all the party comes from what comes out of the compressor. Well, the compressor gets driven by the shaft. So how you drive the shaft and what the drive section of the turbo is made out of is very important. And again, just to loop back and come full circle, this is why we created UHF turbine wheels.
So for you guys out there, what's kind of your biggest question when it comes to purchasing a new turbocharger? Is there one thing in mind that kind of you're always thinking about that you kind of want answered before you make that purchase?
That guy in the end right here is thinking money.
Well, yeah. So,
Is that what you were going to say?
yeah, money, yeah. Can I find it for less on eBay? Yeah, you probably can. And you're gonna buy it off eBay. It's gonna look an awful lot like a turbo.
most of
It
the
will.
guys in my club, I always want to buy a big turbo, and they don't need it. But there aren't a lot of options when I'm like, just buy a 68 HTA. That's what I always tell them, because it's going to solve all your problems.
Well, you know, that's a great answer for a guy that doesn't know what first turbo to put on a DSM.
Exactly.
Well, that's a great place to start, for sure, yeah.
I mean, has that? I remember for a while, stuff wasn't available. You guys couldn't search parts for Mitsubishi. Where have you gone now? Is everything you do now all first performance?
There's just a few MHI parts in my lineup now. They are the Evo 10 upgrade turbocharger that we help Mitsubishi just how to set up how to configure that. They didn't want us to keep building reds and greens and blacks for the Evo 10s while they were still selling Evo 10s. So they're like, hey, let's build a turbo for you, and then you can sell this one. And I was like, all right, cool. I get to fly to Japan.
Well, that was when I was talking.
Yeah. I was like, can I bring some turbos? We'll put them on a test stand while I'm there. Like, yeah, come on. So that was neat. But what was the question again? What was the first part of this?
What should I have? So many people ask me questions about that. About small.
Oh no, you're talking about Mitsubishi. Like, whose parts were they? Which real Mitsubishi parts? Yes.
Like, how is the technology?
Mitsubishi could never believe why they sold so many 49178 5200s. They were like, we made that car in 1993. Why have we sold 40,000 of these into the U.S.? Cars never even sold to the U.S. They didn't understand that, you know. And what Mitsubishi really likes to do is build ships and heavy equipment, you know. So somewhere there's a redhead stepchild in Mitsubishi that's the turbo company, you know, and they're a much smaller aspect of Mitsubishi than you'd think, but they still do make some cool parts. They've got into they're working on a Camaro upgrade right now. They got the Evo 10 upgrade right now. They're working on other stuff. They have a BMW N20 4-cylinder upgrade, and so I like using some of those turbochargers as bases whenever I can because their housings are such top quality. These really high quality cast steel instead of an iron product. So I really prefer that, and that's the one reason why I had to start making my own Evo 9 turbine housings was because they had stopped production on the Evo 9. They ended with the Evo 9, and then all their overrun of service parts, turbine housing stuff, depleted, and they didn't predict any need for it. So they had archived the tooling, and it just got to where like they couldn't fill my orders anymore. It was several years of that, and then finally I ended up talking to the right guy and getting a visit from a guy and was explaining how important this was and that I really wanted it, and we found a way to make that part again. So I do have genuine MHI Evo 9 turbos, the 10.5 single flapper one, and that is on a lot of the Evo 9 upgrade turbochargers that we offer right now. But before that ever happened, I had to make my own one, which is it's like the same material that Tile uses in their stainless steel housings. It's actually manufactured at Tile. Tile is a beautiful foundry up there. They make all their own housings in Owasso, Michigan. So no, I kind of moved away for the most part from using Mitsubishi parts because it's such a long supply chain, and you have to do so much forecasting to get it to come in. And then they're not really interested in making 500 more exhaust housings. You know, you have to give them a way bigger PO than that in order for them to want to do it. So I hope that answers your question about the housings.
Yeah, I remember it was a problem, and I didn't know how you had addressed it.
I had to make stuff.
That's what I was curious.
Yeah.
Like, I remember you used to be more options. You know, it was like the 68, the 71, and the 73. And now it's kind of, I think it's just a 68. Then you go to green, red, black.
That's essentially right. That's essentially correct, yeah.
Has the technology moved forward on the green, red, and black turbos too? They're the same ones that were
No,
like
man.
10 years
Yeah,
ago?
they're not the same turbos at all.
Okay.
They use the same names because everybody understands the power leveling. You know,
Okay.
the green model being a dual purpose, well-behaved turbocharger that you can use on the street, basically max out 93 octane. Okay, that's kind of what a green model is.
Okay.
Then a red model is, you know, maybe a little bit more dual purpose. And then a black model is, I'm really less concerned with, you know, whatever happens with part throttle at 2200 RPM. And I really am focusing on 4500 RPM to maybe even a 9500 RPM red line. You see these guys running in stock appearing. Those cars are like, we're up to, we created models beyond black. Zero is one step beyond black. As a larger model, and to Shootout, what were they running? It was some mid-8s or something last year in the finals.
The FP0 class, I think.
Yeah, or I'll make another company and we'll make a different brand of turbos, and that way we'll have competition for two brands. Well, that's a great point. How many people out there are going to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to make turbochargers for all 5,000 Evos that are out there running? You know what I mean? The sales potential is this big. So I don't want to tell y'all are lucky, but you're kind of lucky because so many people have competed for so long to try to make a little bit better product for your cars that you guys have the best products. I mean, you go look what's available for a BRZ. No. You go look what's available for an S14. No. There's not 4-cylinder S14s out there having events like this and running 7-second quarter miles. That's not what's going on. This is the most highly evolved 4-cylinder turbo niche in the world, man, as far as I'm concerned. If I'm wrong, somebody point it out. But you guys have benefited from some of the most fierce competition in small businesses that there's ever been.
Take credit for that.
Yeah.
If I had these shitty ass turbo rules, stock turbos,
Yeah. I know, exactly. Well, and thank you. I wish I had one right now. I'm kind of parched. Pardon?
that did make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, having to stick to a certain turbo to run a class.
Yes.
It made a difference.
Yes, it made a difference. So many turbos came and went. I mean, people thought, oh, I'm going to jump in that. I want to make some turbos. And then, 2 years later, they're like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. Well, a lot of people, I make it look easy, right? Everything works and, I'm happy all the time and we stay in business year after year. Well, other people try it and they don't realize, what happens on the back end, It's a lot of work, it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it's a lot of supporting people that have problems, You're going to be, when a turbo breaks, you can't tell the guy to fly a kite, Yeah. Just because he had an oil pump break and he hasn't figured that out yet, okay? He's mad at you because the turbo broke. The turbo's the canary in the coal mine. Turbo's first thing that's going to go down if there's a lubrication problem in the turbo. And the engine, you got a lubrication problem in the motor. The turbo's got the tiniest bearings with the highest surface speed delta. So if you have a lubrication problem, the thing with the smallest surface area and the highest surface speed is going to be the first place to burn. Well, that's in the turbocharger. You take a car that can do a 1.3 or a 1.4 60 foot out here, and it's a journal bearing turbocharger. What does that mean? That means that there's one gravity going this way and one gravity going that way in the car from a physics perspective for that first 60 feet. Okay. Well, if I have a pan of oil and I have two gravities fighting each other, and one of them is this direction, dude, and one of them is this direction, dude, my pan of oil is inside the engine at this angle, okay? Now, if you've been on the two-step for 3 seconds at 7,000 RPM, you've also took some of your pan of oil that's down here and you've put about, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 quarts of it into the valve cover. It hadn't come back down yet, okay? So that 3 seconds you spent on the two-step at 7,000 RPM put some of your 4.5 quarts of oil in the valve cover, okay? So now your oil level that's in the pan went from here to here. Okay, you still got the pickup, you're still picking up oil, okay, but now you pop that clutch. Now what just happened? Okay, there's some oil slinging off of everything, so some foamy crap is going into that screen, okay, but when you data log oil pressure at the oil pump at 20,000 hertz, okay, I mean a lot of cycles, you will see the foam. The oil pressure is steady. And then when the foam gets in there, it goes like this. Okay? Well, we just talked about high-speed bearings, right? If they're little bitty surface area and the delta on the surface is very fast, and all of a sudden we go from having, nice Motul in there, or Amsoil, or Lucas, whatever your favorite flavor is, and now we just got a mixture of that and air there. Well, the guys over at the oil company are going to say, don't blame my oil. And the guy over at the turbo company is going to say, don't blame my turbo. Everybody's going to say, don't blame me, because it wasn't me, it was the air. So this is another problem with journal bearing turbochargers, and it's another reason why I really felt motivated to develop ball bearing turbochargers for the stock fitment classes, because everybody in these stock appearing turbocharger classes does not have a $10,000 dry sump system on their engine. So they get aerated oil frequently, and they don't know it. You don't know it because nobody's sampling oil pressure at 20,000 hertz. Nobody sees this. If you're sampling it at 5 hertz, you just go, oh, well, it dropped a little bit. You didn't see the bubbles though, because you're just you're just opening your eyes every once in a while and looking at the gauge. You're not seeing that the gauge is fluctuating rapidly because you're not watching the gauge enough. So that's what I'm talking about, sample rate. So, take it or leave it, but journal bearing turbochargers are going to have their limitations when you don't supply. Ever played that air hockey game when you were a kid? Okay. Does it work very good when the air pump's not on? That's a journal bearing turbo, man. If you're playing air hockey, okay, and your brother is about to score on you, you reach over here and turn the switch off, the puck's not going to make it all the way to the goal, okay? Now imagine the puck was actually loaded with 500 pounds of pressure and sliding across the table at 2,000 feet per second. It's actually going to light fire. It's actually going to burn. It's going to melt. It's going to braid. Pieces of it are going to come off, and it's going to look like the inside of your turbo when I look at it, when I took it apart. So that's one of the main reasons that I like ball bearing turbochargers. Everybody always says, but it spools so much faster. It spools so much faster. I'm like, I could care about that. If it spooled 200 RPM later, I still whoop you. Okay, that won't get in the way. Now, it burning down and not turning anymore, that will get in your way. So that's the main reason I prefer ball bearing turbochargers, particularly for drag racing. Autocross is another big case. Street cars, you don't have that so much. You're on this road out here, and it's a pea gravel asphalt thing. You're not going to be able to pull 1.5 G going this direction. Don't tell me unless you have your GTR, because I know that you can do it in a GTR. Okay, but on a DSM, you're not going to. We don't have the clutches, we don't have the active, traction control for every tire. So you just can't do that kind of G work. So you get journal bearing cars on the street. That can last. I got guys out there running a red model from 2006, and it's still going. But they're guys that don't pull a whole lot of G's, and so they never burn their turbo bearings. How'd I get up on ball bearings again?
I'm not sure.
Anyway. How am I doing on time? Do I have any more time? Or is it?
We've got a little bit. What do we got?
Minutes?
We got to wrap, but
Okay.
5. But
Okay.
is there any questions about any type of turbo technology that you guys would like to know about?
Can you
Any
take
question
one of
about,
those and see how far they get?
The difference between a billet compressor wheels versus a casting, or difference about. We just talked a little bit about one of the advantages of ball bearings, but is there any other turbo technology or feature that you've heard about people promoting that you're kind of interested in exactly how it works, or what the real features and
Say
benefits
you were
are?
going to start working on doing, you would like to see smaller ball bearing turbos?
No, actually,
What you said?
when you start going smaller on the turbo sides, the shaft speeds go up really
I mean,
high,
like the size of
and
the
then
turbos, that's what
once you get to about 180,000 RPM or so, you're really out of ball bearing range. Ball bearings don't go 180,000
Is that why
RPM.
the ball bearing turbos now are the larger ones?
Well, that probably has something to do with the popularity of the larger ones being ball bearing, along with the durability things I was just talking about. But journal bearings is a hydrodynamic journal bearing, or a floating journal bearing, a ramp bearing, whatever terminology you want to use for it, depending on which bearing inside the turbo we're talking about. Those are very high speed bearings. So I mean, you want to you need a tiny little turbocharger on a 600cc. What do they call those K cars?
K cars.
Yeah. You need a little bitty turbo like that. That has got to be a journal bearing turbocharger, because the shaft speed on that could be 250,000 RPM.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you can't do that with balls.
Gotcha.
That's not where you use a ball bearing.
You're not going to see a green with ball bearings in it.
You do, because those only go about 150,000 RPM. Those are okay. Yeah, that's fine. You can use it for that.
That would work.
We make lots of ball bearing greens for Evos.
Okay.
And we've just recently begun integrating the Xona Rotor ball bearing cartridge into the DSM lineup. I have an example of it over at the booth if you want to see it. It also has a 10 centimeter, the bigger 10 centimeter exhaust housing on
So
it.
for somebody like me with a street car, I want the latest and greatest technology for my turbo. So, I mean, what should I get?
You want the Xona Rotor, you want the ball bearing Xona Rotor cartridge with the larger 10 centimeter turbine housing on it is what you're looking for.
Okay.
Probably something in either maybe like a, well, I know there's so many, I've got so many sizes in there. You could have you could have a choice of 6 different configurations. So.
Okay. That's when you need data.
Well, that's when you've already collected some data about what you've been already doing, and then you call me and we talk about it.
Gotcha.
Then we figure out where to go.
Okay.
I'll use this turbine wheel for you and this compressor wheel with this housing on it, and that should do what you're looking for.
Okay.
and then it probably will. And if you start running it, or if you say you wait 9 months to put it together and you have mission creep, okay?
Yeah.
And what started off as a 500 horsepower streetcar project is now an 800 horsepower drag car project. You might have to revisit it.
I'm going 85 back to pump gas.
Yeah,
I
so-
want drivability. I want to get in the car and drive away and have it 400 or 500 horsepower.
That's less of a
but dead
technical
reliable.
challenge. Well, because now I'm just going that direction. It's easy to know the path without data. But if you're trying to go up into the performance arena, you're trying to climb this mount of power. I need to know where you're at on that 3D map. How far? This is the origin of nothing. Okay. I need to know where your mass flow is. I need to know what your shaft speed is. I need to know what your EMAP is, so that I can build this turbo right here for you.
Gotcha. That's cool. So we're gonna see a lot of the Xona Rotor stuff coming into the DSM stuff now, because I hadn't
Yes.
seen it
Yeah.
yet.
It
But
hasn't.
it's coming.
It hasn't, but it's begun.
Okay, that's what that was my. I wanted to know. So
It's
I'm
begun.
hanging on there.
It's begun.
It's gonna be on the website.
Andrew Gonzalez, the No Crust GSX,
Yeah.
beautiful white GSX.
Yes,
oh my
we
God!
hung out
You
with
do
him all
not
day
see
on the
a more
program.
beautiful,
That's the one
immaculate.
from Colorado?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You do not. This guy. Every time he drives his car, he details his wheels when he parks it. That's that car. That's Andrew. He's got the first one of the Xona Rotor ball bearing cartridges in his black model on his car.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yep.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay,
Yep.
where's the technology going? When can I have it? Because I look at all the Xona Rotor stuff that came out and goes, I don't need that.
Well, yeah, because
I want
wait.
the technology.
Well, the Xona
but I
Rotor-
need the
yes,
zero.
yes.
I don't know how to put that. No.
Well, the Xona Rotor product line launched as a motorsports turbocharger product line.
Right.
It wasn't even vehicle specific. So now I made it vehicle specific because I was a big part of Xona Rotor. So I was like the whole way down the line, I'm like, okay, this is great, and I want to create this cartridge also because I want to integrate it into my Evo product or my Subaru product or whatever. But now I feel like I've got to the point with the DSM market where it did this, and it's had its low, but we're through the low. We're through the low, and now we're to the point where everybody's really appreciating these beautiful cars that still exist. Okay, and I'm no longer having to create a $599 product, out of poor quality castings to stay relevant. So now that I feel like that's changing in the market, I feel more comfortable investing in developing higher end products for DSM. So this has begun and it's happening now.
Excellent.
Cool. Gotta wrap it up. So.
All right, well, thanks everybody. I appreciate your questions and thanks.